Hello everyone, welcome to this session on subroutines and control abstractions. This session is part of Module 3 of Programming Paradigms, course code CS403. This session is meant for S7 CSE students of APJ Abdul Kalam Technological University. I am Dr. Renu Mary Daniel, Assistant Professor, Department of CSE, Rajagiri School of Engineering and Technology. In this particular session, we will be discussing the topics subroutines, control abstraction, static and dynamic links, calling sequences and inline expansion. Once again, welcome to this session. Suppose we have a function called sum which takes two integer arguments as input. From the name of the function itself, it is clear that the function will compute the sum of the two integer values. Consider another example. Suppose we have a function called square root which takes an integer argument as input. From the name of the function itself, it is apparent that the function will compute the square root of the integer argument. So control abstraction is the association of a name with a program fragment that performs an operation and is thought of in terms of its purpose or function rather than its implementation. Subroutine is a principal mechanism for control abstraction. In different programming languages, a subroutine may be called a procedure, function, routine, method, or a subprogram. So these terms may be used interchangeably. Conceptually, they are pretty much all the same thing. Part of a program separate from the main program that does something and then returns to the main program. Some languages have specific meanings for the terms such as procedures, functions, subroutines, methods, etc. For example, in Pascal, procedures don't return values and functions return values. But that's merely a reflection of how Pascal was designed. In Fortran, a function returns a value and a subroutine returns multiple values. Yet none of these languages really allow us to come up with a universal definition for these terms. In fact, the term procedural programming refers to a whole class of languages, including C, Fortran, and Pascal, only one of which actually uses the term procedure to mean anything, that is Pascal. The term function comes to computer science from mathematics, where it refers to a sequence of operations that return some value, such as those used to draw a graph. The method is a subroutine that is part of a class. The term is exclusively used in association with object-oriented programming. A subroutine performs its operations on behalf of a caller, which waits for the subroutine to finish before continuing its own execution. Most subroutines are parameterized, that is, the caller will pass some arguments that influence the callee's behavior or provide it with data on which to operate. Arguments passed by the caller are also called as actual parameters. They are mapped to the subroutine's formal parameters at the time a call occurs. Most languages require subroutines to be declared before they are used, although few such as Fortran, C and Lisp do not mandate it. In this slide, we'll have a quick recap about the stack layout. We have already learned about call stacks in Module 1, and whenever a subroutine is called, its activation record will be pushed on top of the call stack. And the activation record contains arguments, return values, bookkeeping information, local variables, and temporaries. Bookkeeping information pertains to the saved registers and debugging information, while temporaries are intermediate values produced during complex calculations. Then there is a stack pointer which points to the address of either the last used location at the top of the stack or the first unused location, depending on the implementation. Then there is a frame pointer which points to the currently active subroutine. And the objects in the frame in that particular activation record can be accessed via fixed offsets from the frame pointer. And we have also learned about local variables like local arrays whose bounds or dimensions are known during elaboration time of a subroutine. So in that case, we have learned that the array will not be stored in the fixed size portion of the frame. Instead, it will be stored in the variable size portion of the frame. And from the fixed size portion of the frame, inside the fixed size portion of the frame, we'll store a dope vector corresponding to this local array. And the dope vector has several things related to the local array. One of it is a pointer to the starting address of the array, while the array itself will be stored in the variable size portion of the frame. So if the size of an object like a local array is not known at compile time, then the object is placed in a variable sized area at the top of the frame. So this was discussed in module 2. Its address and dope vector are stored in the fixed size portion of the frame at a statically known offset from the frame pointer. In this slide, we have an example for elaboration time allocation of arrays in ADA or C99. So towards the right hand side of the slide, you can see an ADA procedure called foo, which takes an integer argument called size as input. And inside the body of array of foo, we have an array called m, and the array's bounds are dependent on the value passed to size. So you can see that the array's bounds are 1 to size, 1 to size. So it is a two-dimensional array, and its bounds will be known only during the elaboration time of foo. Only when foo is called we will know the bounds of the array m. So it's not possible to store array m in the fixed size portion of the activation record. So here inside the call stack, what is shown here is the activation record of the procedure foo, and you can see that there is a fixed size part of the frame and a variable size part of the frame. In the variable size part of the frame, we store the array m, and from the fixed size part of the frame, inside the fixed size part of the frame, we have a dope vector which stores lots of information about this local array m, and also there's a pointer to the starting address of m. So these two information, pointer to m and dope vector, is stored in the fixed size part of the frame along with the temporaries, bookkeeping information, return address and arguments. And you can see that the frame pointer is pointing towards the currently active subroutines stack activation record, which is foo's activation record, and the stack pointer is pointing towards the last use location on the frame. So here m is a square array whose bounds are determined by a parameter passed to foo at runtime. The compiler arranges for a pointer to m and a dope vector to reside at static offsets from the frame pointer. M cannot be placed among the other local variables because it would prevent those higher in the frame from having static offsets from the frame pointer. Additional variable size arrays or records can easily be accommodated this way. In this slide, we'll discuss about static and dynamic links in the call stack. In a language with nested subroutines and static scoping, objects that lie in surrounding subroutines can be found by maintaining a static chain. Remember that we have already learned about nested subroutines and static scoping. So in nested subroutines, we'll have an enclosing subroutine. For example, in this code structure, we have an outermost subroutine A, which is the enclosing subroutine. Then we have two inner subroutines B and E. B is in turn the enclosing subroutines for C and D. So inside the call stack, from C we have a static link to its enclosing subroutine. Notice that C's enclosing subroutine is B. So we have a static link from C to B. And also from D we have a static link to its static parent, which is B. So D's enclosing subroutine is B. So from D to B also we have a static link. And B and E are enclosed by A. So B and E will have static links to its parent A, enclosing subroutine A. So this is meant by static chain. Then each stack frame contains a reference to the frame of the lexically surrounding subroutine. This reference is called the static link. Remember about static scoping. In static scoping, whenever we are in a subroutine and we are searching for a particular variable, if it is not found in the current scope, then we'll immediately look in the global scope. So that was in the case when nested subroutines are not supported. Otherwise, we'll follow the static links to check for the variables in the enclosing subroutines scope. So that is the use of static links. Well, notice that in the left hand side of this call stack, we have dynamic links. These corresponds to the calling sequences. So this means that subroutine A has called subroutine E. So that is why we have a dynamic link from E to A, and E has called B, so we have a link from B to E. So by analogy, the saved value of the frame pointer which will be restored on the subroutine return is called the dynamic link. So we'll be returning back to A. Since E has called B, from B we'll be returning back to E. So all these dynamic links corresponds to the calling sequences. Remember that in the previous slide, we had seen that there were several subroutines like A, B, C, D, etc. And we had seen that their activation records were being pushed onto the stack depending on the order in which they were called. And we had dynamic links to help us traverse back to the return addresses. So whenever a function is called, lots of things has to be done in the call stack so that we can make room for the activation record of the callee. Maintenance of the subroutine call stack is the responsibility of the calling sequence. That is, the code executed by the caller immediately before and after a subroutine call, and of the prologue, code executed at the beginning, and epilogue, code executed at the end of the subroutine which is called. Sometimes the term calling sequence is used to refer to the combined operations of the caller as well as the prologue and epilogue of the callee. The tasks that must be accomplished on the way into a subroutine include passing parameters. If the callee requires some parameters, it has to be passed. Then the return address has to be saved. And we have to change the program counter which points to the next instruction to be executed. We have to change the stack point so that we can allocate space for the new or the callee's activation record. Saving registers that contain important values that might be overwritten by the callee. Changing the frame pointer to refer to the new frame, and executing initialization code for any object in the frame that require it. So in the subsequent slides, I'll be explaining about call stack and calling sequences, how the stack pointer and frame pointer is being updated, and all such things from the perspective of the x86 processors. So we'll just have a quick recap about the registers in x86. Modern x86 processors have 8 32-bit general purpose registers. I'm sure you have learned about this in microprocessors. The register names are mostly historical. For example, EAX used to be called the accumulator since it was used by a number of arithmetic operations. ECX was known as the counter since it was used to hold a loop index. While most of the registers have lost their special purposes in modern instruction set, by convention, 2 are reserved for special purposes. That is the stack pointer, ESP. So you can see ESP over here. This is the stack pointer, and EBP. There is another register called the base pointer. So in the subsequent slides, whenever I talk about stack pointer, I might be referring to it as ESP, and whenever I talk about frame pointer, I might be referring to EBP. Here you can see a typical calling sequence. We assume here that the subroutines have been called as shown in the upper right. You can see that we have a procedure C, then we have procedure B, A, and we have main program. Suppose that the execution starts from the main program, then subroutine A will be called initially. So A's activation record is pushed on the call stack. Next, from A we are calling subroutine B, so B's activation record will be pushed on top of A's activation record. Next, from procedure B we are calling B once again recursively, so B's activation record is pushed on top of B's record. Then from B, suppose again we are calling C the second time. Now C's activation record will be pushed on top of B's record. Then from C, suppose we are calling the procedure D, so D's activation record will be pushed on top of C's record. And suppose the currently active subroutine is D, because the frame pointer is pointing to subroutine D's activation record, and the stack pointer is pointing to the last used location on the call stack. And you can also see here the explanation about the contents of a single activation record. Here they have shown the contents of activation record of, corresponding to subroutine C. So towards the end, there is the return address of subroutine C. Then we have miscellaneous bookkeeping information which corresponds to saved registers and debugging information. And we have local variables, temporaries, and finally arguments to call routine. So I want you to understand that from inside C's activation record, we have the arguments to subroutines which are called by C. So remember that whenever a function is being called, only the caller will know the arguments to the callee. The callee doesn't know what are the arguments which are to be passed to it. So when in C's activation record, we'll have arguments to subroutines which are called from C. So C will have arguments to D. So that is one point that I want to note from this diagram. So here you can see that if D returns and C calls E. E's frame will occupy the same space previously used for D's frame. So once D completes, then we know that after D completes, C will call E. So E's activation record will take this place. At any given time, the stack pointer register points to the first unused location on the stack, and the frame pointer register points to a known location within the frame of the current subroutine. So here in the slide we have another example of how to maintain a call stack. You can see that the functions are called in this order. Initially we have the main routine or main function, which calls the function draw square. Then draw square calls the function draw line. So what you see over here is the call stack, and towards the bottom of the call stack we have the activation record for main function. And since main function calls the function draw square, you can see that the parameters for draw square are included in the activation record of main. So this orange region denotes the activation record of the main function. Then the blue region over here denotes the activation record of the callee, which is draw square. And you can see that there is the return address of draw square, which will be a part, so it will return back to a region inside the main function. Then we have the locals of draw square, and finally draw square will call draw line. So the parameters for draw line will be included in the stack frame or activation record of draw square. Then the currently active subroutine is draw line because it was called at the last. So draw line is executing now, and you can see that the frame pointer is pointing towards the activation record of the currently active subroutine, which is draw line. And there we have the return address of draw line and the local variables of draw line, and the stack pointer is pointing towards the top of the stack. So whenever a caller calls a callee, so there'll be a call statement. Whenever it executes the call statement, immediately the return address will be included in the activation record of the new subroutine. So that's why we have the return address towards the bottom of each subroutine's activation record. So the base or frame pointer is conventionally used to mark the start of a function's stack frame or the area of the stack managed by that function. When a function needing arguments is called, they are pushed onto the stack immediately before the call. As you can see, the return address is pushed above the arguments. These informations are passed by the caller. Stack pointer stores the address of either the last used location at the top of the stack or the first unused location. The stack frame at the top of the stack is for the currently executing subroutine. The stack frame usually includes at least the following items in push order: the arguments passed to the calling routine if any, the return address back to the routine's caller, then the space for local variables of the routine if any, and so on. There are lots of other information that might be there in the activation record, like the bookkeeping information, temporaries, etc. So all that is not included here for simplicity. So whenever a function is called, we have seen that few things will be done by the caller itself. Like the parameters that are to be passed to the callee will be decided by the caller. A few things will also be done by the function's prologue, which is the code that is introductory code that is executed by the callee itself. A function prologue typically does the following action. So we now have to allocate certain space for the activation record of the callee. To do that, we need to know how much bytes has to be allocated for it, and we have to move the stack pointer accordingly to allocate space. Further, we have to move the frame pointer to point to the currently active subroutine. Then we have to save the previous value of frame pointer so that we can restore it once the callee returns back. And so lots of such things has to be done, and it is taken care by the function prologue. So let's see in detail what happens. A function prologue typically does the following actions. It pushes the current base pointer or frame pointer onto the stack so that it can be restored later. It assigns the value of stack pointer to base pointer so that a new stack frame will be created on the top of the old stack frame. Moves the stack pointer further by decreasing or increasing its value depending on whether the stack goes down or up. On x86, the stack pointer is decreased to make room for the function's local variables. Local variables as well as variables that were passed on the stack can be referenced from the EBP or the frame pointer, and it is guaranteed not to change during the entire function's execution. To access a local variable on the stack frame, it would look something like move EAX EBP minus 4CH in x86. ESP is the processor's stack and the stack pointer. When you push or pop something from the stack, the ESP changes accordingly. So the main operations are shown towards the left hand side. Push EBP, move EBP ESP and sub ESPN. This is the main things that are done in a function prologue. And we'll see this in detail diagrammatically in the next slide. Suppose that at this point of time, the function draw square has just called the function draw line. That means it has just executed the function call to the callee draw line. So whenever a draw square executes any function, any caller executes the call statement to the callee, the return address of the callee will be pushed onto the call stack. So draw line's return address will be pushed onto the call stack. And whenever you push something into the call stack, the stack pointer will be immediately updated and it will move on to the top of the stack. So this is what happens. It points to the top of the stack. Next, the caller will take charge and its prologue or the introductory code will execute. We know that in the function prologue, these are the statements that are there. Push EBP, move EBP ESP, sub EBP ESPN. So EBP corresponds to the frame pointer and ESP corresponds to the stack pointer. So initially what we are doing is we are saving the current value of the frame pointer onto the activation record of the new subroutine, so that when the new subroutine, that is when draw line returns, the frame pointer can be restored back to its original position. So that is what happens with push EBP. Push EBP helps us to store the current value of the frame pointer in the activation record of the new subroutine. So this is shown here. You can see that the current value of the frame pointer is saved over here above the return address. So here it is saved in the activation record of draw line. The next statement to be executed is move EBP ESP. So here EBP is the destination and ESP is the source. So now we have to make the frame pointer point to the currently active subroutine, which is draw line. Therefore, we are making we are storing the current value of the stack pointer into the frame pointer. And the current value of stack pointer is over here. The stack pointer is currently over here. So we are going to move the frame pointer to this particular position. That is shown over here. Frame pointer is now moved to this position. After that, we have to allocate space for the local variables inside draw line. So now the frame pointer is pointing to the currently active subroutine's activation record that we are building. And now we have to make room for the local variables of draw line. And finally, we have to make the stack pointer point to the top of the activation record, to the top of the stack. To do that, suppose our local variables require local variable and the saved EBP. In total, it requires say 20 bytes of memory. In that case, in the case of x86, when the stack grows up, you can see that the addresses decrease. So here it is 20199 and over here it is 20160. When it grows up, it is 20143, 20120 and so on. So when the stack grows, the addresses decrease. So that's why we have the statement here sub ESPN, that is to allocate space for the entire activation record. We have to subtract some bytes from the stack pointer. So suppose the local variables require local variables along with saved EBP requires 20 bytes of memory. Then we have to subtract 20 bytes of memory from this earlier value of stack pointer so that it will be moved up to the top of the stack. So here you can see that initially stack pointer was over here. It has been moved up to 20100, which is now the top of the stack. So these are the things that happens in a function prologue. Initially, it will store the current value of the frame pointer so that it can be restored when the function returns. Then it will move the stack pointer value to the base pointer. So the frame pointer will point to the currently active subroutine. Then it will move the stack pointer further up to allocate space for the local variables, temporaries, etc. of the currently active subroutine. Now we will see what happens in the function's epilogue. So we know that function's prologue is the part of the code in the callee which executes in the beginning, and the epilogue is the part of the code in the callee which executes towards the end. before it returns. So the function epilogue, it reverses the action of the function prologue and returns control to the calling function. It typically does the following actions. This procedure may differ from one architecture to another, but generally this is what happens. It drops the stack pointer to the current base pointer, so room reserved in the prologue for local variables is freed. Pops the base pointer off the stack, so the saved value of the base pointer or frame pointer will be popped off the stack so that it is restored to its value before the prologue. Returns to the calling function by popping the previous frame's program counter off the stack and jumping to it. Now here in this slide we'll see what happens when the function drawLines epilogue executes. So in one of the previous slides where I had shown you the call stack for drawLine and drawSquare, we had stopped with this. That is, drawLine is currently executing. drawLine's local variables are all included in its activation record. The stack pointer will point to the top of the stack. The frame pointer is pointing to the currently active subroutine, which is drawLine's activation record. So in the function's epilogue, just before drawLine returns, these are the statements that will be executed in the epilogue. Move ESP EBP. So here ESP is the destination and EBP is the source. So what we are going to do now is we are about to remove this activation record corresponding to drawLine. So we'll now move the stack pointer to where the frame pointer is. Okay, so that the space allocated, room allocated for the local variables of drawLine will be reclaimed. So that is what is illustrated in this instruction, move ESP EBP. So the value of EBP will be copied to ESP or the stack pointer. That is, stack pointer will be moved to where the frame pointer is currently. So this will happen now. The stack pointer will point here, and immediately when it is moved back, now the saved value of EBP, so that will be popped out of the stack. So now the room allocated for local variables is reclaimed, so it is popped out of the stack, and also at the same time the saved value or the previous value of the frame pointer will also be popped out of the stack. So that is illustrated in this instruction, pop EBP. So the previous value of the frame pointer, which was stored in drawLine's activation record, will be popped out so that the frame pointer is restored back to its position before we called drawLine. So this is what happens. Now saved EBP is popped, and the frame pointer will be restored back to its position before we had executed the epilogue of drawLine. And once we do this, finally we'll execute the return statement of drawLine. And when we execute the return statement of drawLine, the return address which was pushed onto the stack will be popped out, so that will be removed, and finally the stack pointer will be updated accordingly so that it points to the top of the stack. So these are the things that happens when we execute the function epilogue. When we discussed about the registers in x86, we had seen several general purpose registers, and inside a function you can freely use the general purpose registers such as EAX, EBX and ECX. However, they are not guaranteed to be persistent across function calls. Other functions can use them freely. So you must save them before calling other functions. If you use any register, you must make sure to save them before you use them and restore them to the original values before you return. Registers you must save before you call a function are called the caller saved registers. Registers you must save before you can use them in a function are called callee saved registers. Here in this slide we'll summarize various operations that are performed by the caller. So the caller, as we know, we have already seen that the caller saves the parameters to the callee in its own activation record. Apart from that, there are various few other things that the caller also maintains. So we'll see what are those. So any general purpose register that might be modified by the callee must be saved by the caller itself. So the caller saves any register whose values will be needed after the call. Further, the caller computes the parameters that are to be passed to the callee and moves them into the stack. Specifically, it will be stored in the caller's activation record itself. Further, if the language supports nested subroutines, then it maintains a static link to the enclosing subroutine and passes it as an extra hidden argument. Also, when the caller executes the special subroutine call instruction to jump to the subroutine, it simultaneously passes the return address on the stack or in a register. So these are the various things that the caller does. Let's now look at the call stack. So here you can see two frames. This is the activation record of the previous frame or the caller, and this is the activation record of the currently executing subroutine or currently active subroutine. So in the previous frame you can see that the arguments for the currently executing subroutine is included in the previous subroutines or caller's activation record. Then when the caller executes the subroutine call instruction, the return address will be pushed onto the stack. Then when the current subroutine executes, when it executes its prologue, the previous value of the frame pointer will be pushed onto the stack, so that when it returns, the frame pointer can be restored back to its original position. Then it also stores the callee itself. When it calls some other function, it saves some registers. So the callee itself might save some registers, and it maintains static links, local variables, temporary values, and also if the current subroutine calls some other subroutine, then the arguments to the callee has to be maintained. And you can see that the stack pointer points to the top of the stack and the frame pointer points to the currently active subroutine's activation record. Now let's see certain caller rules which are specific to x86. To make a subroutine call, the caller should do the following operations. Before calling a subroutine, the caller should save the contents of certain registers that are designated caller saved. Caller saved registers are EAX, ECX and EDX in the case of x86. Since the call subroutine is allowed to modify these registers, if the caller relies on their values after the subroutine returns, the caller must push the values in these registers onto the stack so they can be restored after the subroutine returns. This is part of the miscellaneous bookkeeping information in the stack frame. To pass parameters to the subroutine, push them onto the stack before we make the function call. Parameters should be pushed in inverted order, that is, the last parameter should be pushed in first. To call the subroutine, we have to use the call instruction. The instruction places the return address on top of the parameters on the stack and branches to the subroutine code. This invokes the subroutine, which should follow the callee rules, which will be discussed in subsequent slides. After the subroutine returns, immediately following the call instruction. So when the subroutine returns, the control will return back to the statement which immediately follows the call instruction inside the callee. Then the caller can expect to find the return value of the subroutine in the register EAX. To restore the machine state, the caller should remove the parameters to the callee from the stack. This restores the stack to its state before the call was performed. Restore the contents of the caller saved registers EAX, ECX and EDX by popping them off the stack. The caller can assume that no other registers were modified by the called subroutine. Here in the slide we'll see callee rules in x86. Whenever we call a subroutine, the caller does few actions, and then the callee's prologue does some set of actions to allocate space for the activation record. And finally, when the callee returns, its epilogue reverses the action of the prologue. So we have seen all these things diagrammatically in previous slides. Here we'll have an explanation for the same. So in function prologue, the first instruction to be executed is push EBP. That is, we push the old base pointer value at the beginning of the subroutine so that we can later restore the appropriate base pointer value for the caller when the subroutine returns. The next instruction is move EBP ESP. We move the stack pointer into the base pointer or frame pointer to obtain a point of reference for accessing parameters and local variables. The frame pointer is used by convention as a point of reference for finding parameters and local variables on the stack. So remember that when we execute the statement move EBP ESP, the base pointer or frame pointer will be moved up to point to the callee's activation record, which is currently being built. Next, we allocate enough room or space for the local variables of the callee. by executing the instruction sub ESPN, where n is the number of bytes that has to be subtracted from the stack pointer so that it will point to the top of the stack. Remember, the value of n is dependent on the number of local variables and the data type of the local variables in the subroutine. Next, we have to save the values of the callee saved registers that will be used by the function. To save registers, we have to push them onto the stack. The callee saved registers in x86 are EBX, EDI and ESI. So once the function's prolog finishes its execution, the function is all set to execute. It will perform all the operations in its body, and finally it will be ready to return. And then it will execute the function epilogue. The operations that are to be performed in the function epilogue are: restores the old values of any callee saved registers such as EDI and ESI that were modified. The register contents are restored by popping them from the stack. It deallocates the local variables. Now we know the instructions in the function epilogue move ESP EBP. Now the obvious way to do this, that is to deallocate local variables, is to add the appropriate value to the stack pointer. Because remember that to allocate space for local variables, we had subtracted some bytes from ESP so that it moves to the top of the stack. So the reverse operation is to add the appropriate number of bytes to the stack pointer so that it will move down. In practice, a less error-prone way to deallocate the variables is to move the value in the base pointer into the stack pointer. That is, to execute the instruction move ESP EBP. Remember, ESP is the source, ESP is the destination, and EBP is the source. Now this works because the base pointer or frame pointer always contains the value that the stack pointer contained immediately prior to the allocation of the local variables. Remember the figure that we discussed previously. Immediately before returning, restore the caller's base pointer value by popping the EBP off the stack. So you have to execute the instruction pop EBP so that the frame pointer will be restored back to the position before we had made the function call to the callee. Recall that the first thing we did on entry to the subroutine was to push the base pointer to save its old. Finally, return to the caller by executing a return instruction. This instruction will find and remove the appropriate return address from the stack. So these are the operations that we have to perform in the function epilogue. Summarizing, the task that must be accomplished on the way out or while returning from a subroutine to the caller includes passing return parameters of function values. So the function, the callee might have computed some return value that must be passed back. Then finalization code for any local variables if required. That is, we have learned that several arrays, their bounds or their dimensions might be known at runtime. In that case, if it is a local variable, if it's a local array, it will be stored in the heap. So in that case, before the function returns, we have to deallocate the memory allocated in the heap for the array. So this is the finalization code for local variables that has to be performed. Then we have to deallocate the stack frame. That is, we have to reclaim the space allocated for local variables, and we have to restore the value of the stack frame, or we have to restore the value of the stack pointer. And also we have to restore the value of the frame pointer as well as the callee saved registers, and we have to restore the program counter, and that means we have to pop out the parameters to the callee. All these things has to be performed. Some of these tasks are performed by the caller because they differ from call to call. Like we have to restore the program counter, caller saved registers has to be restored. So all these things has to be done by the caller, while others has to be done by the callee, by the epilogue of the callee, like passing the return values, finalization code for local variables, deallocating stack frame, restoring the callee saved registers. All these things has to be done by the callee. We know that there are callee saved registers as well as caller saved registers. So who will actually do all this register saving part? This is the trickiest bit. Ideally, we have to save only those registers that are in use in the caller and which would be overwritten in the callee. Now this is almost impossible to do perfectly because we don't know which one will be overwritten finally in the callee. The simplest solution is either to save all registers in use from the caller or to save all registers that will be overwritten from the callee. However, this is usually a bit unnecessary. We want to avoid extra overhead in general. Generalizing, a typical calling sequence includes the following. In its prologue, the callee allocates a frame by subtracting an appropriate constant from the stack pointer. It saves the old frame pointer into the stack and assigns it an appropriate new value. It saves any callee saved registers that may be overwritten by the current subroutine. After the subroutine has completed, the epilogue moves the return value, if any, into a register or a reserved location in the stack. It restores callee saved registers if needed, restores the frame pointer and the stack pointer, jumps back to the return address. Finally, the caller moves the return value to wherever it is needed, and it restores the caller saved registers if needed. Let's now discuss about inline expansion. You might have already learned about inline function while you studied C and C++. Recall the overheads of a normal subroutine call. There are lots of things that we have to do to maintain the call stack. To add the new activation record, to remove the activation record when the function returns, space allocation for local variables in the new frame. Then we have to maintain the stack pointer and frame pointer accordingly. Then we have to save and restore callee or caller saved registers. So all these things has to be done in a normal subroutine call. As an alternative, many language implementations such as C, C++, and Ada allow certain subroutines to be expanded inline at the point of call. A copy of the call routine becomes a part of the caller. There is no actual subroutine call. Code size will increase as the body of the inline subroutine appears at every call site within the caller. So this is one disadvantage. This is not an option in the case of recursive subroutines. Formally, the inline keyword is a hint in C++ and C99 rather than a directive. It suggests but does not require that the compiler actually expand the subroutine inline. In Ada, the programmer can request inline expansion with a significant command or pragma. So towards the bottom of the slide, you can see an inline function in C, C++. Inline int max. So the name of the function is max. It returns an integer value. The arguments are a and b. Both are integers. And within the body of the function, we have a ternary operator. A greater than b, a b. So if the expression a greater than b evaluates to true, it returns a. Otherwise, it returns b. The equivalent inline function in Ada is shown here. Function max a greater than a comma b integer, return integer. So it takes two integer arguments a and b as input and it returns an integer value. Again, inside it we have a conditional statement. If a greater than b, then it returns a, otherwise it returns b. And you can see that it becomes an inline expansion because of the keyword pragma inline of max.